I stood frozen in my place, unable to move, unable to breathe as the world around me seemed to collapse into silence. My mind kept whispering that what I had just seen was not real, that it was some cruel trick of the eyes, perhaps even a nightmare that would vanish the moment I blinked. But no matter how many times I told myself that this was only an illusion, deep inside I knew it was the truth. An unbearable, horrifying truth that made my entire body shiver. It was my younger sister, the same sister I had raised with love, the girl I had cradled in my arms, protected from the cruelties of the world, and cherished as if she were my own daughter. To me, she had always remained that innocent child, vulnerable, pure, untouched by the storms of adulthood. And yet today, in one devastating instant, I was forced to confront the reality that she was no longer the little girl I thought she was. She was 20 years old now, a grown young woman, and she had crossed a line that tore my heart apart. What made the revelation unbearable was not just her involvement, but the identity of the man standing beside her. It was my own husband, the man I had trusted completely, the man in whose loyalty I had placed my life and my soul. For years, I had watched their closeness with the innocence of a blind heart. I thought nothing of it when he treated her kindly, when he took her out for small trips, or when he teased her as a brother-in-law would. He often told me, "She is not only your sister, but mine too. She brings joy to our home." His words would fill me with gratitude, making me believe I had married the kindest man alive, someone who valued my family as much as his own. But now, staring at the horrifying scene that unfolded before my eyes, I realized how wrong I had been. All the moments I once celebrated, his affection, his generosity, his concern, now appeared as daggers piercing through my trust. I felt as though the ground beneath me had been ripped away. I remembered countless evenings when my sister visited, almost daily, and I never objected. She was lonely after my marriage, and I thought her visits kept her heart alive. My husband, too, had welcomed her presence, saying it brought brightness into our home. I had seen that as a blessing, never knowing it was slowly turning into my curse. And in that instant, my world shattered. My trust in my sister, my belief in my husband, and the foundation of my marriage all crumbled before me. What lay ahead, I could not yet imagine, but I knew one thing: my life would never be the same again. In the beginning, I had never once suspected that there was anything wrong. My husband's affection toward my younger sister appeared nothing more than kindness. After all, she had always been deeply attached to me, and when I got married, her world felt empty without my constant presence. She would often cry, confessing that she missed me terribly. Our mother assured me that her sadness was only natural, that with time she would learn to adjust. Out of sympathy, I encouraged her to visit me as often as she wished, believing it would ease her loneliness. My husband, instead of being annoyed by her frequent presence, welcomed it with open arms. "She is not just your sister," he would say with warmth in his voice. "She is my sister too. I care for her happiness as much as yours." His words touched me deeply. I felt grateful to have a husband who not only respected me but also valued my family. Whenever he took her out for rides or bought her small gifts, I thought it was his way of filling the gap in her life after my departure from our home. It never crossed my mind that these gestures could mean something else. Over time, however, I began to notice how effortlessly their bond grew. Their conversations were frequent, their laughter shared in corners of the house. Often, I would enter a room and find them speaking in hushed tones, only to fall silent the moment I stepped in. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence, convincing myself that there was no reason to doubt them, but a strange uneasiness began to take root in my heart. Still, I silenced my instincts. I told myself my husband was simply generous and my sister was still too young to be part of anything dangerous. My husband's reassurance that she brought life into the house was enough to keep my suspicions at bay. In fact, I admired him even more, believing that few men would go so far in showing love for their wife's family. I often thought how lucky I was to have such a considerate companion. Yet, beneath my gratitude, tiny cracks of doubt had started to form. I noticed how his attention toward me had begun to fade. Where once his eyes searched for mine, they now often lingered on her. Where once his evenings were spent by my side, they were now occupied in her company. The innocent closeness I had applauded so many times was slowly beginning to suffocate me. But still, I chose to believe in their goodness. I told myself repeatedly that I was imagining things, that love and trust demanded silence. What I did not realize was that silence would soon become my greatest weakness. The uneasy feeling inside me began to grow stronger with each passing day. First, I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that I was only overthinking, that my husband and my sister could never betray my trust. But the little things, those tiny shifts in their behavior, started to gnaw at my heart like sharp needles. Whenever I entered a room where they were sitting together, laughter would instantly die and silence would take its place. Their eyes would lower and their voices would fade as though my presence had interrupted something I was never meant to hear. I told myself repeatedly that it was nothing, yet my soul refused to believe it. I tried to joke about it once, asking why they stopped speaking the moment I came near. My husband brushed it aside casually, saying there was no special reason, but his tone was dismissive, almost as though he wanted to shut down the conversation entirely. That casual dismissal planted a deeper wound inside me. Even my sister, once so obedient and respectful, was no longer the same. She had always listened to me without complaint, had always been gentle with her words, but now she had grown defiant. If I tried to correct her or give her advice, she would snap, saying, "I'm not a child anymore, stop interfering in my life." The sharpness in her tone pierced me more than I could admit. I stared at her in disbelief, wondering when she had changed so much and why she no longer looked at me with the same love she once did. Worse still, my husband's affection for me seemed to be slipping away, like sand escaping from my hands no matter how tightly I tried to hold it. His eyes no longer lingered on me with the warmth they once had. His conversations with me were shorter, his smiles rarer. Yet when my sister was around, he seemed attentive, lively, and full of energy. The painful comparison was impossible to ignore. What unsettled me even more was the secrecy that now hung between them. I often found them sitting together, whispering in low tones, and the moment I appeared, they would fall quiet. It felt as though I had been pushed out of my own life, replaced by someone I had trusted the most. And every time I tried to gather courage to confront them, fear held me back. Fear that perhaps my suspicions would be confirmed. Still, I told myself it was all in my head. I tried to bury my doubts beneath forced smiles and silence. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The distance between us grew slowly but painfully, like a wound that refused to heal. My husband, once the center of my life, now seemed to belong to someone else. I longed for his attention, for his laughter, for the warmth he once reserved only for me, but whenever my sister was present, it was as if I no longer existed. He would sit beside her, listen to her stories, and laugh at her words while I sat in silence, invisible in my own home. It wasn't only his neglect that hurt me, it was the change in my sister's behavior that cut me even deeper. She, who once clung to me like a shadow, now pushed me away with every word. If I tried to spend time with her, she became restless, insisting she wanted to be with my husband instead. And if I ever attempted to question her, she would lose her temper, telling me not to control her life. The girl I had raised with love and sacrifice now looked at me as though I were an obstacle in her path. One evening, I tried to stop her from coming over. I thought maybe some distance would bring back the balance we had lost, but she became furious, storming into my husband's room and complaining that I no longer wanted her around. To my horror, instead of understanding me, my husband turned against me. His words were sharp and final. "Never forbid her from coming here again. This is her home as much as yours. She is free to come whenever she pleases." I stood speechless, unable to believe what I had just heard. It felt as though my own husband had chosen her side over mine. My heart broke into pieces, yet I swallowed my pain and said nothing. That night, I cried alone, the sound of my sobs muffled against my pillow, while neither my husband nor my sister noticed or cared. The next days were worse. My husband no longer tried to hide his favoritism. When she was around, he barely looked at me. The joy I once felt when she visited turned into bitterness. I wanted my husband's attention, but whenever she entered the house, I disappeared from his world. Inside me, fear was growing. Fear that something was happening between them, something hidden, something dangerous. But I lacked the courage to face the truth. I chose silence, though it tore me apart because deep down I knew, if I discovered the reality, it might destroy me completely. The silence was eating me alive. I could no longer bear the torment of not knowing, of living with questions that burned like fire in my chest. Their stolen glances, their sudden silences, their whispered conversations, all of it had become too much. I told myself that I deserved to know, even if the truth shattered me completely. I could not continue to live like a blind woman in my own home, pretending nothing was wrong when my heart screamed otherwise. So, one afternoon, when my husband told me casually that he was taking my sister out, something inside me snapped. I smiled faintly and pretended not to care, but the moment they left, I wrapped my shawl around me and stepped out into the street. My hands trembled as I hailed a passing taxi. When the driver stopped, I pointed toward the motorcycle carrying my husband and sister. "Follow them," I instructed, my voice barely steady. He nodded, and we began the silent pursuit. The city passed by in a blur as my heart pounded against my ribs. Every turn they took felt like another nail in the coffin of my trust. I remembered how many times he had told me they were going to the park or to buy ice cream. But where were they really going? Why did secrecy shadow their every step? After what felt like an eternity, their motorcycle came to a stop in front of an unfamiliar house. My stomach twisted with dread. This was no cafe, no public place. It was a private residence, quiet and isolated. I watched in horror as my husband and my sister entered together, the door closing behind them. My breath caught in my throat. Why here? What could they possibly be doing inside? I told the taxi driver to wait, though my legs felt too weak to move. For a moment, I considered turning back, convincing myself I was imagining everything. But then I remembered the nights of tears, the neglect, the sharp words that had replaced affection. No, I could not run away. I had to know. Gathering every ounce of courage, I stepped out of the taxi and walked toward the house. My palms were sweaty, my knees shaking, but my determination was stronger than my fear. The house was eerily quiet, its stillness only making my heart beat louder. Then faintly I heard voices, muffled but clear enough to know they belonged to my husband and my sister. I inched closer to the door of the room from which the voices came. My hand hovered over the frame, my breath uneven. Part of me prayed it was all innocent, that I would walk away relieved, but deep down I knew what awaited me on the other side would change my life forever. My heart pounded so loudly I could almost hear it echo through the empty house. Each step toward the half-open door felt like a step into the unknown, a place where I might lose everything. I paused for a moment, gripping the wall for support, torn between turning back and moving forward. My instincts screamed at me to walk away, to preserve the little peace I had left, but my wounded heart demanded the truth. With trembling hands, I leaned closer and peered through the small opening. In that instant, my entire world fell apart. Inside the room sat my husband and my sister, and she was draped in a bridal veil. My chest tightened as if someone had stolen the air from my lungs. Around them sat a few strangers, 2 men and a woman, people I had never seen before. Their presence only deepened the horror. My sister, the same girl I had loved and raised like my own child, now sat pressed against the man I had sworn my life to. My vision blurred, my head spun, and before I could comprehend the scene fully, darkness swallowed me whole. My body gave way and I collapsed onto the cold floor. The last thing I saw was my husband leaping to his feet, his face struck with panic as he rushed toward me. His voice echoed faintly in my ears, calling my name, but it drifted away as everything around me turned silent. When consciousness returned, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled the air, and the steady beeping of a monitor told me I was still alive. My eyes fluttered open, and the first sight that greeted me was my husband sitting beside me, his face pale with worry. For a brief moment, confusion clouded my mind. Had it all been a nightmare? But as soon as my memory sharpened, the image of that room, my sister veiled like a bride, struck me with merciless clarity. Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling down my cheeks before I could stop them. My husband leaned closer, his voice urgent and soft. "Please, listen to me, it's not what you think." But I turned my face away, unwilling to hear his excuses. He reached for my hand, his grip trembling. "I was going to tell you everything today. You were never meant to see it this way." I stared at the blank wall, refusing to meet his eyes. Betrayal still burned too deeply inside me. Yet something in his tone, an unusual heaviness, almost like sorrow, made me pause. My mind wrestled between fury and curiosity. Could there truly be more to this story than what I had seen? His voice trembled as he spoke, and for the first time since our marriage, I saw something in his eyes I had never noticed before. Fear mixed with determination. He took a deep breath and said, "What you saw was never what you think it is. If I had told you earlier, you would never have believed me. And if you had reacted in anger, the consequences would have been unbearable for your sister." I turned my face toward him, still resisting, but his words pulled me in against my will. He continued, "Your father never changed. You believe the worst ended when he forced you toward that cruel old man years ago, but he did not stop. This time, he set his eyes on your younger sister. To secure property and wealth for your brothers, he promised her to the same man who once demanded you, a man twice her age with a history of cruelty, someone who sees women as nothing but possessions." The room felt colder with every word he spoke. My breath caught in my throat as his revelation sank in. Could it be true? My heart screamed in denial, yet my mind recalled the fear I had often seen in my sister's eyes, the hidden sorrow behind her silence. Perhaps that was why she had become so distant, why her laughter had disappeared, why she had snapped at me instead of crying in my arms. She had been carrying a secret too heavy for her fragile heart. My husband leaned closer, his tone softer now. "She found out by accident. She overheard your father speaking on the phone. From that moment, she lived in terror, but she could not tell you. She knew you. She knew your heart is fiery and emotional. You would have confronted your father and brothers at once, and they would have forced the marriage immediately. So she kept quiet, but she was drowning inside. I could not stand by and watch." He paused, his eyes searching mine, pleading for me to believe him. "I promised her that I would protect her. That's why I spent those months so distant from you. I had to meet the matchmaker, investigate families, and prepare a safe future for her. Every secret conversation, every visit you doubted was part of my plan to rescue her. And today, in that house, her nightmare finally ended. She was married, not to the monster your father chose, but to a kind man I trust with my life." My tears fell uncontrollably. The betrayal I thought I had witnessed was unraveling into something entirely different. And yet the pain of my doubts remained sharp in my chest. For a long moment, I sat frozen, my tears flowing silently while his words echoed in my mind. I had spent weeks, months drowning in suspicion, building walls of doubt around myself, and yet all along he had been carrying a burden I could not have imagined. Still, a part of me demanded answers. My voice was weak but firm when I finally asked, "Why didn't you tell me? Why let me suffer in silence, believing you had betrayed me?" He lowered his eyes as though ashamed. "Because telling you meant revealing a truth that was too dangerous. If you had known about your father's plan, I know you would not have stayed quiet. You would have confronted him, and your sister's life would have been destroyed. They would have forced her marriage immediately, and nothing could have stopped them. I had to protect you both, even from yourselves." His explanation cut through my anger, but it also deepened my guilt. He had chosen silence, not because he wanted to hurt me, but because he feared my reaction. "So you carried it alone?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Every day. Do you think it was easy for me to turn away from you, to let you believe I no longer cared? It broke me too, but each time I saw your sister's frightened eyes, I reminded myself of the promise I made, to keep her safe no matter what it cost me." He leaned closer, his voice filled with quiet intensity. "I searched everywhere for the right man. Families came and went, some willing but untrustworthy, others trustworthy but unwilling. I could not rush. I had to be certain. That is why I often took her to meet the matchmaker. That is why I seemed to give her more of my time. It was never about love or betrayal. It was about duty, about saving her from a life worse than death." My chest ached as I listened. The strangers in that room, whom I had thought were conspirators in my ruin, were in fact witnesses to my sister's salvation. The veil I had seen was not a symbol of betrayal, but of freedom. She had been married to a kind and dependable man, chosen carefully to shield her from the cruelty of our father. I felt torn apart inside, ashamed of my doubts, yet relieved by the truth. My husband's eyes, filled with exhaustion and sincerity, looked into mine as he finished softly, "I didn't betray you. I was protecting your sister, and through her, I was protecting you." The weight of everything pressed against my chest as I wept openly, no longer hiding my pain. I turned to my husband, my voice trembling. "Forgive me," I whispered. I doubted you. I judged you without knowing the truth. I turned your silence into betrayal and her distance into hatred. I failed you both. He reached for my hand, his grip gentle yet steady. You don't need to ask for forgiveness, he said softly. You were hurt. You only saw what anyone in your place would have seen. But now you know the truth, and that is what matters. His calmness broke me even more. How could he show me such compassion after the cruelty of my suspicions? But my guilt stretched beyond him. It reached toward my sister, the girl I had raised, the girl I believed had turned against me. I thought of her tears when I first married, the way she lingered near me as though afraid I would vanish from her life forever. I thought of how quickly she hardened, not because she had stopped loving me, but because she had been protecting me from a truth too heavy to share. She had fought her battle in silence, shielding me from pain even while she drowned in it herself. I need to see her, I said firmly. I need to hold her and beg her to forgive me too. My husband nodded. You will. She will understand. She never hated you, even when she seemed distant. Her heart has always been with you. In the days that followed, I met my sister again. The moment our eyes locked, the wall between us shattered. I rushed to her, tears streaming, and she fell into my arms. For the first time in months, I felt the warmth of her embrace without the shadow of suspicion. I am so sorry, I sobbed. I thought you betrayed me. I thought you no longer loved me. But you were carrying a burden too heavy for your young shoulders, and I failed to see it. She clung to me, her own tears wetting my dress. No, sister, she whispered. I never hated you. I only wanted to keep you safe. I could not let you suffer the way I did. That embrace became the beginning of our healing. I had lost faith, but truth had restored it. I had misjudged, but love had corrected me. My husband, once the target of my doubt, now stood before me as a man of courage and sacrifice. My sister, once the source of my pain, was revealed as a silent fighter, and I, broken yet renewed, understood the lesson life had forced upon me. Trust can be clouded by fear, but when truth finally emerges, it has the power to heal wounds that once seemed impossible to mend.